4 motorcycles sitting side by side in a garage, a Harley-Davidson Sportster, a Ducati Monster, a Moto Guzzi V7, and a Suzuki SV650. All of them have 2 cylinders arranged in a V, same basic concept, and every single one of them sounds completely different. The Sportster has that lazy, uneven potato-potato idle. The Ducati has a sharp, syncopated bark. The Moto Guzzi has a transverse rumble you can feel through your boots. And the Suzuki splits the difference with a smooth, eager growl. So why? They all have 2 cylinders. They all burn gasoline. They all spin a crankshaft. The answer has almost nothing to do with the brand name on the tank. It comes down to the angle between the cylinders and the geometry of the crankshaft. And once you understand that, you understand every motorcycle engine ever built. So let's break down every single engine type, from the simplest 1-cylinder thumper all the way to engines so exotic they nearly bankrupted the companies that built them. We start with the most basic engine in motorcycling. 1 cylinder, 1 piston, 1 combustion event for every 2 full rotations of the crankshaft. This is the single-cylinder engine, and riders call it a thumper for a very obvious reason. You hear it at idle, and it's just this deep, rhythmic pulse. Thump, thump, thump. You can feel every individual firing event through the seat, through the handlebars, through the foot pegs. The beauty of a thumper is its simplicity. There is one of everything. 1 piston moving up and down, 1 set of valves opening and closing, 1 cylinder that air can flow around from every direction. That makes them cheap to build, easy to maintain, and incredibly light. It's why the Honda Super Cub uses a single-cylinder engine, and the Super Cub is the best-selling motor vehicle in human history. Not motorcycle, motor vehicle. Over 100 million units have been produced since 1958. The trade-off is vibration. That single heavy piston slamming up and down creates forces that want to shake the entire motorcycle apart. That's why you rarely see road-going singles much bigger than about 700 cubic centimeters. The practical ceiling is right around there, unless you're Ducati. In 2023, they took the piston from their Panigale superbike, a 116mm bore monster, and stuck it in a single-cylinder engine, the Super Quattro Mono, 659 cubic centimeters. 77.5 horsepower, the highest output of any production single-cylinder engine ever built. They basically looked at the upper limit and said, yeah, we're going past that. Now here's where things start to get interesting. Take that single cylinder and add another one right next to it, standing side by side, both facing forward. That's a parallel twin, also called an inline twin. 2 pistons, 1 crankshaft, simple and compact. And this layout is the reason modern motorcycling looks the way it does. How did a parallel twin become so important? Because of 1 motorcycle. In 1937, a Triumph engineer named Edward Turner designed the Speed Twin. It was a 498 cubic centimeters parallel twin, making about 27 horsepower, which does not sound like much today, but it was a revelation at the time. It was faster than the big singles it competed against, smoother, and it was not any heavier or wider. Turner had basically proven you could double the cylinders without doubling the problems. That motorcycle set the template for the entire British motorcycle industry for the next 40 years. But here is the part that makes parallel twins really fascinating. The crankshaft geometry completely changes the engine's personality. In a 360-degree crank, both pistons go up and down together, firing alternately. That is the classic British twin sound, a smooth, even exhaust note. The original Bonneville and the Triumph Thruxton, they all use this. In a 180-degree crank, the pistons move in opposite directions. One goes up while the other goes down. Honda used this in their classic twins from the 1960s. It revs higher and smoother, but creates a rocking motion in the engine. And then there is the 270-degree crank. This is the one that has taken over the motorcycle world in the last decade. In a 270-degree crank, the pistons fire at uneven intervals, 270 degrees apart, then 450 degrees apart. And those exact intervals are identical to what you get from a 90-degree V-twin engine. So you get that V-twin character, that burbly, syncopated exhaust note, wrapped up in a package that is narrower and cheaper to manufacture. Yamaha figured this out first with their MT-07 and the CP2 engine platform. Honda followed with the Africa Twin. Aprilia did it with the RS660. KTM, Suzuki, everyone jumped on board. The 270-degree parallel twin is now the default engine for the modern middleweight motorcycle. I mean, think about that for a second. Engineers figured out how to fake a V-twin's personality with a completely different engine layout just by changing the crankshaft. Speaking of V-twins, let's talk about the real thing. Take two cylinders and arrange them in a V shape on a shared crankshaft. The angle of that V determines everything about how the engine sounds, vibrates, and delivers power. Start at 45 degrees. That's Harley-Davidson. They have been building 45-degree V-twins with a single shared crank pin since 1909. And that specific combination creates the most recognizable exhaust note in motorcycling. Both connecting rods sit on the same crank pin, which means the cylinders fire 315 degrees apart, then 405 degrees apart. Two quick thumps followed by a long pause. That's the famous potato, potato, potato sound. And no, Harley does not own that sound. They actually tried to trademark their exhaust note back in 1994. Honda, Kawasaki, Suzuki, and Yamaha all filed opposition, arguing that the sound was simply a physics consequence of the 45-degree angle and shared crank pin. After 6 years of legal fighting, Harley gave up and withdrew the application in 2000. Now jump up to 90 degrees. This is Ducati's territory. At 90 degrees, something beautiful happens with the physics. The engine achieves perfect primary balance naturally, without needing a balancer shaft. One cylinder's forces cancel out the others. The trade-off is that you get uneven firing intervals at 270 and 450 degrees, which gives you that distinctive Ducati bark. Then there's Moto Guzzi, and they do something completely different from everyone else. Most manufacturers mount the crankshaft across the frame, left to right. Moto Guzzi mounts it front to back, which means the cylinders stick straight out to the sides, one on the left and one on the right. You can see them poking out past the rider's knees. Every cylinder gets perfect airflow. And here's the fun part. Because the crankshaft spins along the direction of travel, when you blip the throttle while sitting still, the whole motorcycle rocks to one side from the torque reaction. That's a Moto Guzzi thing. Nobody else does it. And this is a good time to settle the L-twin versus V-twin debate, because it comes up constantly in motorcycle forums, and the answer is actually pretty simple. Ducati calls their engine an L-twin because of how it's mounted in the frame. The front cylinder lays nearly horizontal, maybe 21 degrees above flat, and the rear cylinder stands nearly vertical. It looks like the letter L, but mechanically it's a 90-degree V-twin. Same as a Suzuki SV650, same as a Honda VTR 1000. The L-twin name is Ducati marketing, not a different engine architecture. The physics are identical. Fabio Taglioni designed that 90-degree layout back in 1971 for the Ducati 750 GT, and Ducati has stuck with it ever since. Over 50 years of the same basic architecture, refined again and again. If you're enjoying this breakdown so far, hit subscribe. I cover motorcycle engineering and riding culture every week. All right, so here's where things get really interesting. What happens when you split the difference between a twin and a four? You get 3 cylinders in a row with a 120-degree crankshaft, the inline triple. Triumph has owned this configuration for decades, and there is a good reason for that. A triple fires once every 240 degrees of crank rotation, perfectly evenly spaced. It is smoother than any twin, but still has more character and mid-range torque than an inline four. Engineers and journalists call it the best of both worlds, and they are not wrong. The tragic origin story is the 1968 Triumph Trident. Triumph's engineers designed it as the answer to the Japanese fours they knew were coming. It was a 740 cubic centimeter air-cooled triple making 58 horsepower, technically excellent. Then Honda dropped the CB750 just a few months later, and the Trident was dead on arrival. Better engineering, better price, electric start, disc brake. The British had the right idea and the worst possible timing. Today, Triumph supplies the official engine for the Moto2 World Championship, a 765 cubic centimeter triple that replaced Honda's inline four starting in 2019. Yamaha also builds a fantastic triple in the MT-09 family. And if you want something truly absurd, the Triumph Rocket 3, holds the record for the largest displacement production motorcycle engine at 2,458 cubic centimeters. That is not a typo, by the way. Now we arrive at the engine that created the modern superbike. 4 cylinders in a row across the frame, the inline 4. This story has one beginning, and it's the Honda CB750. In October 1968, Honda unveiled this motorcycle at the Tokyo Motor Show, and the rest of the industry immediately understood that everything had changed. It was a 736 cubic centimeters transverse inline 4, making 67 horsepower. It had the first disc brake on a mainstream production motorcycle. It had an electric starter when British bikes still used kickstarters, 5-speed gearbox, a top speed of about 124 miles per hour, and it cost $1,495 in the United States, while comparable British bikes were going for 2 to 3 times that price. Here's how fast Honda was moving. The very first batch of CB750 engines had sandcast cases because Honda did not even wait for proper production dies to be made. They just started selling them. Those early sandcast bikes are now worth $25,000 to $45,000 to collectors. Honda sold over 430,000 CB750s by 1978. The British motorcycle industry, which had dominated the world for decades, was essentially dead within 10 years. Triumph went bankrupt. BSA collapsed. Norton hung on by a thread. One motorcycle from one company in Hamamatsu, Japan, did that. The reason inline 4s dominate sport bikes is physics. With a flat plane 180-degree crank, you get one combustion event every 180 degrees of rotation. 4 perfectly even power pulses per 2 crankshaft revolutions. That's why a Kawasaki ZX6R or a Yamaha R6 can scream to 14,000 revolutions per minute with that signature wailing exhaust note. The engine is inherently balanced and loves to revers. But in 2009, Yamaha did something radical with the R1. They rearranged the crankshaft so the 4 cylinders no longer fire at even intervals. Instead of that smooth, predictable pattern, the pistons fire in an uneven, syncopated rhythm, and it sounds nothing like a traditional inline 4, it howls like a V8. The engineering reason was borrowed directly from Valentino Rossi's MotoGP bike. When all 4 pistons fire evenly, they create a parasitic force that fights the rider's throttle inputs. Yamaha's cross-plane crank eliminates that, giving the rider a more direct, more intuitive connection between throttle twist and rear tire grip. They took an inline 4 and made it feel like a V-twin at the rear wheel, while keeping all the top-end power of a 4-cylinder. And that might be the most clever engineering trick in modern motorcycling. This is the part that connects everything. If you have been paying attention, you have noticed a pattern. The 270-degree parallel twin mimics a V-twin. The crossplane inline 4 was designed to feel like a V-twin. Everyone keeps trying to capture V-twin character in different packages. That's because the uneven firing interval creates a more intuitive connection between throttle and traction, and racers figured that out long before the street bikes caught up. But not every engine designer was chasing V-twin character. Some of them just wanted more cylinders. And in 1978, Honda answered a question nobody else had the nerve to ask. What if you put 6 cylinders across the frame of a motorcycle? The Honda CBX 1000, a 1,047 cubic centimeter, air-cooled, double overhead cam inline 6 with 24 valves and 6 individual carburetors, 105 horsepower at 9,000 RPM. And the man who designed it was Shoichiro Irimajiri, who as a 24-year-old at Honda had engineered the 250 cubic centimeter RC 606 Grand Prix 6 that Mike Halewood rode to back-to-back world championships in 1966 and 1967. The CBX was a direct descendant of those race engines. Irimajiri himself said it only took a year and a half to develop because Honda already had the technology from their Grand Prix racing experience. The obvious problem with 6 cylinders across the frame is width. But Irimajiri solved this with tricks borrowed straight from those Grand Prix bikes. He tilted the cylinders forward 33 degrees, took the primary drive from between cylinders 3 and 4 instead of the crank end, and used the engine itself as a structural chassis member with no lower frame tubes. The result was an engine only about 50 millimeters wider than the CB750-4, and the sound. 6 small pistons firing in perfect sequence, 3 evenly spaced power pulses per crankshaft revolution, screaming to a 9,000 RPM redline. People compare it to a 1970s Formula One car, and they are not exaggerating. No other production motorcycle has ever sounded like a CBX at full throttle because no other manufacturer has ever built a high-revving, sport-tuned 6 for the street. The modern BMW K1600 and the Goldwing are 6s, but they are tuned for low RPM cruising. The CBX was tuned to scream. Honda built around 41,000 of them before pulling the plug in 1982. The cheaper, lighter CB900F4 outsold it immediately, and 6 carburetors needing constant synchronization did not help. Today, clean examples sell for $15,000 to $22,000. The CBX proved that you could put a Grand Prix engine in a street motorcycle. It also proved that the market preferred something simpler. And while we are talking about engineers who got creative with cylinder count, here is a fun connection. Remember Edward Turner, the guy who designed the 1937 Triumph Speed Twin that defined the parallel twin? 9 years before that, in 1928, Turner sketched an engine that was basically 2 parallel twins stacked together, 4 cylinders arranged in a square pattern with 2 counter-rotating crankshafts geared together in one crankcase. That became the Ariel Square 4, produced from 1931 all the way to 1959. Nearly 16,000 were built. The same man who created the most important twin also created the most creative 4. And the twins he designed eventually killed the market for his own 4-cylinder bike. You cannot make that up. Which brings us to the V4. 4 cylinders arranged in 2 banks, sharing a crankshaft, forming a V. This is the current king of high-performance motorcycling. Ducati's Panigale 5.4 runs a 90-degree Desmosedici Stradale engine derived directly from their MotoGP bike. 1,103 cubic centimeters, making over 213 horsepower with a counter-rotating crankshaft. Aprilia takes a different approach with the RSV4, using a 65-degree V angle chosen specifically because it keeps the engine narrow enough to fit their racing chassis. The RSV4 claims 220 horsepower at 13,000 revolutions per minute. In MotoGP right now, Ducati, Aprilia, Honda, and KTM all use V4 configurations. Yamaha is the last team still running an inline 4. The V4 won because of packaging, shorter crankshaft, lower rotational inertia, better mass centralization with the engine sitting further rearward, and easier intake and exhaust routing for top-end power. Now let's go horizontal. Take 2 cylinders and lay them flat, pointing out in opposite directions on a longitudinal crankshaft. This is the Boxer engine. BMW has been building this exact layout since 1923. Let that timeline register. Over 100 years. Every trend, every revolution, every oil crisis, every emissions regulation, and BMW just kept making the same fundamental engine. Nothing else in motorcycling even comes close to that kind of commitment. The R32 launched in 1923 with a 486 cubic centimeter air-cooled flat twin and shaft drive. And the Boxer didn't just stay in Munich. During World War II, the design was so good that both the Soviets and the Americans straight up copied it. The Soviet IMZ factory built clones that became the Ural sidecar motorcycle, still in production today. Harley-Davidson built the XA, basically a photocopy of the BMW R71 for desert military use. 2 superpowers looked at the Boxer and said, "Forget designing our own, just build theirs." Why does it work so well on a motorcycle? The center of gravity is absurdly low because the cylinders sit below and to the sides of the crankshaft. Each cylinder sticks out into the wind for natural air cooling. The crankshaft runs front to back, so shaft drive connects straight to the rear wheel without extra gearing. It's elegant in a way that most engine designs aren't. The downside is width. Those cylinders poking out the sides limit your lean angle in corners and will hit the ground before you expect them to. But BMW keeps building them because nothing else feels the same. The current R18 runs a 1,802 cubic centimeter Boxer, and you feel every combustion event as a gentle rocking motion that riders describe as the engine breathing. It's less an engine and more a heartbeat. Time for the exotics. And we start with the only flat 6-engine in production motorcycle history, the Honda Goldwing. Honda's engineers could have put any engine in their flagship touring bike. They chose 6 horizontally opposed cylinders. The Goldwing actually started as a flat four in 1975, the GL1000 engineered by Toshio Nozue, the same guy behind the CB750. But the flat engine concept originally came from Irimajiri's 1972 M1 prototype, a massive flat six that was never meant for production but planted the seed. By 1988, Honda finally fulfilled that vision with a production six in the GL1500. The current Goldwing runs a flat six, displacing 1,833 cubic centimeters, and it is so smooth it feels like someone strapped a jet turbine between your legs. Perfect firing balance from every direction, zero vibration. The trade-off is that this motorcycle weighs 390 kilograms wet. That's not a motorcycle. That's a couch with a license plate. And people cross entire continents on them because nothing else on two wheels can match that level of effortless long-distance comfort. Next up, the two-stroke. And this one is a eulogy for the most exciting engine type that ever lived. In a four-stroke engine, the piston needs two full crankshaft revolutions to complete one combustion cycle. A two-stroke does it in one. That means double the firing frequency, dramatically more power per unit of displacement, and way fewer moving parts. There are no valves, no camshafts, and no timing chain, just ports in the cylinder wall. It's brutally simple and absurdly effective. In the 1960s and 70s, two-strokes were the fastest, scariest things on two wheels. The Kawasaki H1 Mach 3 was a 498 cubic centimeter two-stroke triple, making 60 horsepower in a 174 kilogram chassis. The frame could barely handle the power. The brakes could barely stop the bike. Riders called it the Widowmaker, and they weren't joking. People genuinely died on these motorcycles because the power came on like someone flipped a light switch at 80 miles per hour. In Grand Prix racing, 500 cubic centimeter V4 engines were making over 180 horsepower from just half a liter of displacement. The sound of one at full scream is something you never forget. A high-pitched, angry ring-ding that hits a frequency four strokes can't touch. But emissions regulations killed the street two-stroke. They burn oil mixed with fuel by design, and that was never going to survive modern clean air standards. By the mid-1980s, they were gone from showroom floors. In 2004, James Stewart became the last rider to win an AMA Outdoor Motocross National on a two-stroke. After that, four strokes owned the podium. Two strokes survive today in enduro and motocross machines from KTM and GasGas, and KTM keeps developing fuel-injected versions to meet modern regulations, because some ideas refuse to die quietly. And finally, the wildest engine ever put in a production motorcycle, the Wankel rotary. Forget everything you know about how engines work. A rotary engine has no pistons. Instead, a triangular rotor spins eccentrically inside a chamber shaped like a pinched oval. 3 combustion events per rotor revolution. No reciprocating mass, no vibration. Silky smooth, absurdly compact, and with a power-to-weight ratio that should be illegal. Suzuki tried it first in 1974 with the RE5. A single rotor, 497 cubic centimeters, 62 horsepower. The Italian designer Giorgetto Giugiaro styled it. The throttle controlled 5 separate cables. It was complicated, thirsty, and honestly kind of ugly. Suzuki built roughly 6,000 of them, and the research and development costs reportedly nearly sank the entire company. And no, that's not an exaggeration. Suzuki was genuinely in financial trouble over a rotary motorcycle. But the real rotary story belongs to Norton, and it is one of the greatest what-ifs in motorcycle history. A British engineer named David Garside spent years perfecting a twin-rotor Wankel motorcycle. In 1987, Norton released the Classic, a 588 cubic centimeters twin rotor making 79 horsepower. They built exactly 100 of them and sold every single one within weeks. Then came the Isle of Man TT in 1992. Steve Hislop, riding the Crichton-developed NRS 588 rotary, won the senior TT by 4.4 seconds over Carl Fogarty on a Yamaha. The first senior TT win for a British motorcycle since 1961. 31 years of silence, broken by an engine with no pistons, on the most dangerous racetrack on Earth. Norton's rotary program should have been the start of something incredible. Instead, the chief executive officer Philippe Leroux was prosecuted for misleading investors, fined, and banned as a director. Norton went into liquidation. The fastest British motorcycle in a generation died because the management couldn't keep the lights on. The engine never failed. The people around it did. So where does that leave us? In 2026, the 270-degree parallel twin is eating the middleweight market because it delivers V-twin sole at inline twin prices. V4 engines are dethroning inline 4s at the top of the sport bike food chain. BMW is still building Boxers after a century and shows no sign of stopping. And somewhere in Austria, KTM engineers are still trying to make two-stroke engines pass emissions because that engine is too brilliant to abandon. Every single one of these configurations exists because an engineer somewhere asked a stupidly simple question. What happens if I put the cylinders here instead of there? What if I change the angle by 45 degrees? What if I offset the crank pins? What if I throw away the pistons entirely? And every time the answer was a new sound, a new feeling, and a new reason to twist the throttle. 120 years of internal combustion, and we still have not run out of ways to arrange cylinders. The real question is not which engine type is the best. It is which arrangement some obsessive engineer is sketching on a napkin right now that the rest of us have not heard yet.